question.
It is really the mass extermination.
There is the shocking result of
the systematic ridding of the Jews by Nazi Germany.
It encompasses so much.
Discrimination against millions of people for no other reason that they didn't conform to some notion of a pure race.
During the Second World War, in the Second World War, where there was an attempt to wipe out the Jewish population, I think it has to incorporate that sort of idea of genocide.
But it has happened in much smaller scale in other countries. But I think we stick with the Jews because I think that's where the word was probably used for.
I think of this sort of Jewish term, the Shoah, which is that it's a specific event. It's not just any genocide, it's the genocide that occurred during the Second World War against the Jewish people.
Well, you should be nice to everyone. Just because they're different, you should still be nice.
In what could be described as Europe's darkest hour, the horror story of the Holocaust haunts the memory of the modern-day world. Adolf Hitler's rise to power and his unspeakable actions against the Jews and other minority groups such as Roma and Sinti or Gypsies, homosexuals and political activists living in Nazi-occupied Europe led to the loss of an estimated 6 million human lives. In the years before the outbreak of the Second World War, Jewish people were ostracized from German society. They became Hitler's perfect scapegoat for the problems in the German social and economic climate, and gradually became the German population's most hated people. We can see from anti-Semitic propaganda that the Jews were painted as an evil and parasitic culture intent on destroying the German nation. During World War II, camps that became known as concentration camps were opened in Germany and Poland to confine and segregate Jews from the rest of the world. At first these camps were used, as well as inner-city ghettos, essentially small areas sealed by walls, to remove groups of people out of functioning society, where they starved and grew weak and sick due to cramped and unsanitary conditions. But this was not enough for Germany's fascist leader. He envisioned a perfect Aryan race, a world free from Jews and other, less human people, and thus concocted the most extreme and evil plan in modern history. He would exterminate the Jewish population. An hour from Krakow, Poland's picturesque capital, lies the quiet and unassuming town of Oswiecim. At first glance, this is just like every other traditional village in southern Poland. But look a little further, and this town holds a dark secret. In German, Oswiecim translates to Auschwitz, the collective name for the most notorious concentration camps of the Holocaust. At the height of Auschwitz's activity, there were 3 main camps: Auschwitz I and Auschwitz Birkenau, which remain intact today, and Monowitz, which along with 45 subcamps used mainly for forced labour, have since been destroyed. Auschwitz I was the first of the establishments that turned Oswiecim from village to killing factory. It was here, in May 1940, that Polish political prisoners began to arrive, to be joined later by persecuted Jewish people. It now remains fully intact and serves as a memorial site and museum. Although many thousands of people were killed in Auschwitz I, it served mainly as a work camp. On the iconic iron gates into the camp's grounds, we see the cruel and ironic words, Arbeit macht frei, a German phrase meaning work makes you free. This is a slogan seen not only at Auschwitz I, but also at other such concentration camps, or in German, Konzentrationslager, such as Theresienstadt in the Czech Republic, Sachsenhausen in Oranienburg, Germany, and even in the first of the Nazi concentration camps, Dachau, in Upper Bavaria, Germany. We know from the inconceivably high death toll from these camps that for all but a lucky few, arriving at one of these camps did not mean freedom at all. It meant dehumanization, humiliation, and certain death. In September 1941, Poland saw the opening of the major site of the Nazis' final solution to the Jewish question, Auschwitz Birkenau, a purpose-built extermination camp where at least 1.1 million people were killed in gas chambers with toxic Zyklon B gas. Between the years of 1942 and 1944, this drive for extermination by the Nazis amounted to the death of around 4,000 human beings every day in Birkenau alone. Approximately 90% of the casualty list were Jewish. But this staggering number marks only 1/6 of the number of Jews killed in the Holocaust. Those who did not perish in the hell on earth that was Auschwitz, either by gassing, shooting, starvation, exhaustion, disease, or nightmarish medical experimentation, were rounded up and killed by Gestapo, or the Schutzstaffel, known as the SS. Either that or they died from hunger, fatigue, or sickness contracted in ghettos, forced labour camps, or even on the endless train journeys into Auschwitz itself.
Well, I think it's a disgusting event that's teaches us that not just that like one person can have the kind of power to think something horrible and see it through, but that one person needed to get many thousands and millions of people to follow them. And so I think what that teaches us is that as human beings we all find that a disgusting thing that's taken place, but the masses of the population can stand up and should stand up against that type of behaviour.
There is this duality, and we have to take responsibility to try and be good people. I know it's very easy to get bogged down with your own lives and your own things and to forget about other people. And the Holocaust is a prime example of where just ordinary people did atrocious things or ignored atrocious things equally.
It could just keep happening.
Well, I would like to think that it's taught us that if we feed on our irrational fears and our prejudices, it will result in people doing awful things to other people. But I fear that we continually have to relearn that lesson because it still seems to be happening in the present time as well.
It's remembered and people know about it. I just don't think we seem to have learned any lessons from it, because we can say, oh, it was horrible, it shouldn't happen and all that. It's very easy to say that, but it's more difficult to actually take something from it and to think about what it means, and I don't think that happens enough.
I was growing up, I was very much aware of learning about the Holocaust, and it was a big part of my education experience as a young Jewish person. And I think that being involved in learning about it is so I think it teaches a lot about the frailty of humanity and our ability to each individually to succumb to being very selfish and doing things for our own gain, and that nobody is sort of above that in a way.
The more I've read about it, and I hate to say this, I think relatively little, I'm always shocked to find what happens now around the world, which is probably in many ways the most shocking in my lifetime that has appeared. I'm counting myself, I was a very small child, I was under 4 when it happened in Germany. I think very little has been learned, and I think Europe itself has been quite self-satisfied, except for Germany, think that we are more decent people and that we have never done anything horrible. But of course we have. And I think it's sad and we have to accept that. But I do think that the more we know, the more we could learn. We would become more careful at least.
And I think talking about what happened is really, really essential, and because it can teach us so much.
I think that we should all try at times to really, think, am I ignoring something that matters and that I should be doing something about?
I think it's just to regard people as human beings, whoever they are, and not even dream of thinking anyone is worth less than we are.
I think the challenge for the younger generations of today is to make sure that they don't allow themselves to follow and believe in a cause that can end up as extreme as what's happened in the past.
We've got to continue to remember, because we forget it at our peril.
Racism. They must be scared, mustn't they?
The advance of ISIS. When we say stop immigration,
terror in the heart of Paris.
We've given away control of our borders. We now have an open door.
Armed, 2 men entered the building in the centre of the French capital
massacred people,
and began
civilians,
firing.
killed solely on the basis of their religion.
By the time they'd stopped,
Saddam
at least
Hussein's
12
time.
people were dead.
Meanwhile, in the
Many others
European
The Iraq War of
elections in London, the
2003.
British National Party is fielding a full list of candidates.
It is
Their
not
leader Nick
impossible,
Griffin says they're
but it
campaigning
needs
on
time.
Europe
Charlie
through
Hebdo, a
immigration.
A
satirical
suicide
magazine,
bomber
has
tried
been
to enter a
attacked
market
before.
in a Kurdish district and killed 5 people.
5 or 10 minutes or so.
People here
fear that ISIS can strike again at any minute.
This is an act
Now that
of
dispossession
exceptional
has come
barbarism.
again, the young men are flocking to take up arms.
In looking back at the events of the Holocaust, we must consider the question, why and how did such an atrocity happen? We can find an answer in discrimination.
I think discrimination now, as we well know, is in all areas, whether it's age, race, religion.
Fear and prejudice of difference. Anything that's different from yourself, whether it's the colour of your skin, whether it's your religion, whether it's your sexuality, anything like that.
You treat people differently based on some type of characteristic, and I would associate with that when you discriminate, you treat people that you're discriminating against unfairly.
Discrimination, sadly, is not a thing of the past. Even still, in the UK, a highly developed society, deemed to be forward-thinking and metropolitan, with legislation legalising gay marriage and demanding the prosecution of those that commit acts of hate crime, we still see discrimination.
We look at those parts of the world today where atrocities are happening. There have been genocides in recent years. They maybe don't happen necessarily on the same scale. I see in our current society racism and discrimination, and it becomes more prevalent, especially in times of crisis, and things that used to be considered awful become part of the normal vocabulary again.
So much discrimination every day in our lives, and although it may not always be obvious, I think the way to combat it is to make it obvious and kind of question it, to say, why is that happening? Does that need to happen? So that can make such a big difference. It seems so minor, but questioning stuff and making sure that it's not commonplace and it's not accepted, I think, is the key to making a difference.
I think as an individual, we all have to learn to be very tolerant and accepting of different views, different cultures, different races and nationalities, and really embrace that difference. And I think if individuals we're all very tolerant, then as a collective we'll be much stronger in being able to stand up against any kind of similar movement in the future.
When talking about the Holocaust, we must recognise that first and foremost, it was a tragedy. Millions of people were lost. This loss, the loss of family, the loss of culture, the loss of potential, is perhaps what is the most sad to realise.
When I grew up, I wanted to be a businessman.
A doctor.
A doctor.
Yeah. Or a dancer.
I wanted to go to sea. I wanted to be a sailor on big freight ships travelling the world. I wanted to be a navigating officer because I like geography.
I always wanted to be an author, an artist, or an actress.
A washerwoman. I don't know how long that lasted, but until I was quite old, and that's what I've ended up being. I think really until I was about 10 or 12, I thought it would be brilliant.
These dreams and wishes are not unlike those of the people who were murdered in camps around Germany and Poland, just like Auschwitz. Every single person lost in Auschwitz had friends, enemies, family, children, husbands and wives, jobs, pets, dreams and fears, but they were killed, and all this, their opportunity and potential, was cut short.
It makes me incredibly sad that so many dreams were destroyed, so many wishes and hopes were lost, and every one of those people had hopes and dreams.
Of course, it starts with things that they don't see their families grow up, which I now, having children of my own, think must be just terrible.
It is, it's awful, Sometimes I think of like my children particularly when I think about this, and it just makes me desperately sad to think that that they could be in a situation where people would want to take their lives and the chances for their future away from them. So yeah.
I just find it makes me so sad that, and it doesn't matter whether they were young or old, having an ambition, but just with something to look forward to and a purpose in life, to have that taken from them is just so horrendous.
It was ordinary people who were shot, starved and gassed. Ordinary people, just like you or I, found themselves in the middle of brutality and condemnation. It becomes easy to dehumanize those 6 million who were killed into a victimized mass, and to dehumanize those millions who did the killing into evil and soulless monsters.
What haunts me most is the kettling up of them and then dividing them up into women and children and men and those looking fit to survive. And you just cannot imagine, though you try and imagine, what it must feel like for the people who've been split off. Did they know what was going to happen to them? They must have had a feeling that this wasn't right. They can't have believed that they were just going to go on a happy working holiday.
You know, if Britain became a place where anti-Semitism was incredibly rife and laws started being passed, I would probably think, well, you know, now we have to leave, but where would I go? And what if all my family didn't want to come with me? How would I feel about that? I can't imagine leaving and uprooting your entire life.
Nobody can truly imagine the horror of the Holocaust. But what is even harder to do is to imagine the other side. It is desperately uncomfortable to imagine ourselves behind that enemy line, where only immoral and insensitive evil can work. We cannot see ourselves with the capacity to inflict such cruelty on others. But really, these people were ordinary as well.
Unfortunately, I can easily imagine being one of the people that was a victim. If you happen to be unfortunate enough to be in the group that was being persecuted. And I think what's harder to imagine is allowing yourself to be one of the followers.
It's difficult to imagine yourself in the person of a perpetrator, but there were just as many millions of people who either actively participated in it or passively allowed it to happen. I think that I can understand how people would live in absolute terror and fear, even if they themselves were not being persecuted.
Could I be somebody who committed those atrocities? I'd like to hope no. I don't know. It seems impossible to imagine how I could stand in front of a person and send them to their death, shoot a young child. But lots of ordinary people did it, so how can I say that I never would?